Okay, so in my last video, I talked about the microbiome, what it is and why it's important, how it gets destroyed. I also wanted to add the microbiome makes most of the serotonin in your body. I believe it's the microbiome in the gut and the microbiome in the kidneys. You have a microbiome in your kidneys too. Those make serotonin. Why is that important? Serotonin is the happy neurotransmitter. If you don't have enough serotonin, you're going to feel depressed. So by taking antibiotics, you can destroy your microbiome, which can actually lead to a low production of serotonin, or the happy hormone, and it can actually have mental health effects from taking antibiotics and having a disrupted gut. So that's just a side note that I wanted to include, because sometimes I'll eat gluten or I'll eat something that kind of hurts my gut lining, which I'll talk about in a second, and then I'll start feeling like depressed or sad 3 or 4 hours later, and I'm like, why do I feel this way? This doesn't make any sense. And then I remember I ate something that disrupted my microbiome. So as you start becoming more aware of your own body and like how you're responding to different foods, that will be super beneficial for you. Body awareness is key, and it helps you live a healthy life. Anyways, okay, so the leaky gut, what is it? So basically, in our whole gut passage, right, we have a mucous membrane. And this membrane is super, super, super thin, really tiny. I forget the exact measurements, you can probably look it up, but it's like, I think, 0.5 millimeter thin, or even less than that, of a single layer of cells. And their job is basically to decide what comes into my bloodstream and what I excrete through my gut, like through the other end, okay? And basically, what can happen is if these are disrupted, if they get destroyed, food or toxins or even undigested food gets into the bloodstream before we've properly processed it. And when that happens, our body freaks out because it looks like something bad. It looks like a foreign entity because it wasn't properly processed. Okay? So how does our gut lining break down? There's 3 main things that studies have shown that break down the gut lining. The first one is gluten. Gluten naturally will weaken the gut lining. So let me talk about how that happens. So each of those cells in the gut lining is attached to the other one with basically like a Velcro-like structure that physiologists and anatomy and people who study anatomy call tight junctions, okay? So these little junctions are holding the cells together really tight, right? Those break down from eating gluten. That's why gluten causes so much inflammation, and that's why people are becoming more and more gluten sensitive, because we're just barraged with problems. Anyways, so gluten, lectins are in seeds of all kinds, seeds and grains, and then also glyphosate, which is basically Roundup or weed killer made by Monsanto. So those 3 things break down the gut lining. You can look it up. But lectins, basically, so say for example, like a deer eats berries or a bird eats berries, a deer eats an apple, right? They'll excrete the seed because the seed is coated in a toxin called lectin. It's basically a plant's defense to help self-propagate itself so that a mammal or an animal won't digest the seed, okay? So, but we as humans, we grind up the seed and then we eat it and think that it's going to be healthy for us, right? So lectins, they're in grains, they're in beans, so like wheat, corn, rice, and then beans. But so if you look at our diet, most of our diet is either wheat, right, or has lectins, or is sprayed with Roundup, right? So that's why eating organic is so important. But Roundup doesn't break down in the soil very well, so even our organic food has some Roundup, okay? Or sometimes, like wheat, it's all 3 of those in one, because it has gluten, which is a type of protein in the wheat. It has the lectin, which is the plant's defense system against being consumed. And then it also is usually sprayed with Roundup. So that's why people are gluten sensitive, because it's the 3 things that break down the gut lining wrapped into one thing. So when our gut lining breaks down like that, basically our body gets exposed to things that aren't properly digested. And when that happens, our body freaks out, and it basically starts attacking those molecules that are floating around in our bloodstream, okay? And this causes a state of like immune system alarm and inflammation. And if you have leaky gut a long time, that means you're gonna have inflammation a really long time. And when you have inflammation a really long time, you're gonna start seeing problems like autoimmune conditions, swollen joints, which can then lead to arthritis. You might get sick easier than other people. You might have a lot of weight gain around your midsection. You might be more prone to parasites, things like that. So that's all the consequences of leaky gut. And it's really because leaky gut causes inflammation, and chronic inflammation is the cause of all disease. And that's why I say leaky gut is the start of all chronic disease, because it can